Hello and welcome to another episode of Cavell Cloud Conversations. Finbarr and Patrick, once again, analysts from Cavell, here to talk to you about the latest in the world of cloud communications, UCaaS, UC, CC, contact centers, and unified communications. How are we doing today, Patrick?
Very well, thank you, Finbarr. How are you?
I'm excellent. Nice. As you and I both know, we both finish on the same day this year for Christmas, and we will not be back for quite a while, the 20th. So it is one last hectic week.
Yeah, one last push to get as many things over the line for the new year. And what better to do a year in review predictions podcast, everyone's favorite of the year.
I've taken to calling this the Christmas Bonanza episode, which
I like it. Yeah,
I think in my head works quite well. So yeah, we're going to cover kind of like a little expansive, but like not in deep dive. But we're each going to bring 3 things in the year, things that have happened that we wanted to talk about, and obviously 3 predictions for next year. So let's start off with the year in review. Cue music. We don't have music, but you know what I mean. Year in review. Patrick, what was your highlight UC communications news of 2025?
Well, listeners, I thought before we get to that, thing I thought Finbarr asked me to do some homework for this podcast to think about what were the highlights of 2025, and we'll come on to predictions for next year. And then while I was doing my highlights for 2025, I thought, pretty sure we did a predictions podcast last year.
Oh no!
So should I go back and listen to last year's 2024 predictions podcast? And I thought just before we started this year's, we could review it. And you know what, Finbarr? We've actually done really well.
Oh God.
So our predictions were. So I made a prediction about pushback, and listeners, far be it from us to pat ourselves on the back too much, but I did a prediction about a pushback from public cloud towards hybrid, and I think we've heard about that repeatedly throughout the UCaaS research, definitely that we've done throughout 2025, about hybrid cloud models, and I think we've heard the same on CCaaS. So I think that, but I did steal that from our enterprise research. Your prediction was security becoming way more of a focus, and we've absolutely heard about that in 2025. It's come back in enterprise research. We've been involved in loads of customer projects. So both of our individual predictions were pretty on the money. So I think I'm setting us up for a fall here in 2026, 2027. But those were the sort of key. There was one that we both talked about, which was maybe that there would be a bit of a kickback on use of large language models, or usage to sort of slow down a bit as people looked at pricing models and stuff. And I don't know if we have seen any data for that, but I think probably there has been a bit of pushback over how these are used and the programs internally. So I'm pretty pleased with how we did on our predictions last year.
It's funny that you say that, because there has been a bit of pushback on the use of large language models in a lot of situations.
There we go then.
Identified where a small language model is more appropriate, safer, and better configured. So actually, are large language models fantastic? Yes, but actually we don't need them in every situation, and that's kind of what I thought we said at the end of last year. So
that means we're 3 for 3. So So I thought I listened back to the podcast and thought actually we did pretty well on that. So in terms of highlights, highlights of this year, the first one that I thought when I was going through this was, and I sort of termed this rather sort of ambiguously as a big investment in high growth markets. And the ones, and this is, so I'm primarily looking at this from the cloud communications or UCaaS side, but I think we've seen it from the customer experience side as well. So not just emerging markets that we're seeing grow very fast. So we see lots of markets grow very fast in APAC and LATAM and elsewhere. So not just not just huge investment in those markets, but markets like Germany. Look at the acquisitions that have been made in Germany. Look at people trying to buy route to market. And that's because the German market on the UCaaS side, and I think we've got similar forecasts on the CCaaS side, is forecast to grow at nearly 20%, the user market in 2026. So it's really significant growth. And I think what we've seen is companies look to acquire, they've realized that they need local presence in Germany as an example, so they've bought route to market within that particular market. So I think one of the highlights of the year has been a lot of companies, not just US firms, but also pan-European providers and global providers, really look at those high growth markets. And that's partly because the growth starts to slow in very mature markets like the US or Western European markets, and therefore you have to look at these high growth markets. So I think we've seen a lot of external investment in those high growth markets.
Yeah, and I mean also as well, I mean Germany from the contact center perspective, everyone I've spoken to is sort of predicting an inflection point, which is that they have been delaying investment, and waiting to see what's happening with the technology and sweating existing assets. There is an upcoming point in the marketplace where German companies take a look around and they look at China, they look at what's happening in other manufacturing and other business hubs in the world, and they say, wait a second, if we don't actually modernize quickly, our competitive edge is starting to get eroded. And actually, we need to go pretty hard onto AI. We need to go pretty hard onto improving our customer service and improving our data collection, our data management, and all of those kind of things. Because if we don't, we lose a lot of competitive power. And I think that's a really... Well, maybe I'll put that in my prediction for 2026, is that we'll start to see large movements, I think towards the mid to late half of 2026, in markets that are formerly reticent to deploy these newer technologies because they will be forced to due to the ramping competition and competitiveness of companies that have done it, right? But we won't focus too much on that now because we're still in what we saw in 2025. Yeah. I put more news together, but I think my big thing that I think huge piece of news was obviously NICE buying Cognigy. I thought that was a huge piece of news. Not just because it shows the investment that is the investment demanded to do AI well, like the value of a company that does AI well, but also kind of as a benchmark for the trajectory of the CCaaS or contact center space as an AI powered industry. And we've kind of said all year, CCaaS and contact center is one of those areas where AI is actually very valuable, pushing things ahead, driving the agenda. And then there was one deal out of the entire year which made me say, well, actually, AI is kind of a serious business. It's one of the largest CCaaS players in the market turning around and saying, your conversational AI is brilliant. We're buying that. $1 billion on the table.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair point, and we've balanced this off well, because you've gone for sort of news headlines, and I've gone for maybe slightly more topic related highlights. So my second one was, and you've been involved in multiple of these projects, Finbarr, is vertical focus. So this year has been, I think I could almost, from my work perspective and the Cavell's work, it's almost the year of verticals. And I've bored so many people who listen to this podcast who've been on any calls with me will be bored by the fact we're involved in more vertical focused projects this year at Cavell than we have been in the last 5. Yeah. Everyone, I think, and it's partly because like we talked about before, these markets are becoming so competitive, people are really looking at how they differentiate. And do you have a deep dive option into healthcare? Do you have a deep dive option into retail or education or whatever that might be? And we've been tracking the number of service providers who say they have a vertical focus, both in terms of marketing, but also actually, do they have bespoke integrations into vertical platforms? Do they have dedicated vertical teams who specialize in healthcare and really know that industry? Are they, ex people coming out of the industry to give advice there? So I think that vertical focus is something that has really resonated with me this year in terms of how many communication service providers and vendors are restructuring their businesses to target specific vertical markets, whatever that vertical might be.
Yeah, and you can see the money flowing there as well. I mean, not just in terms of vendor development for marketing, things like that, but also if you look at voice AI startups, one of the big things that highlighted voice AI startups as a point of differentiation for a lot of them wasn't the technology, it was the choice of what vertical they went to operate in, with companies with very similar offerings, but carving themselves in integration into the healthcare tool or the workforce management tool or the, front-end billing tools, like all of these systems that define what a specific vertical needs versus another one, and that being kind of a differentiation point for these companies where, the AI part of the technology isn't actually the differentiation because they're all taking from existing models and existing systems. So vertical differentiation, definitely a trend we've seen accelerate this year.
Yeah.
In communications in general, I think in UCaaS and CCaaS. And you've done quite well, actually, to pick trends that are going across both of our areas, where I've just picked like pieces of CCaaS news I wanted to talk about, which I think...
No, that's good, though. I think we've got a good balance there.
But the other thing that my next one was ServiceNow's acquisition of MoveWorks, right? So 2.8 billion. All of my news is all acquisition focused because I was just following the money this year. But what does that mean? That's MoveWorks is, automated customer ticket resolution, automation of customer support, automatic deflection, AI-led resolution. So when a company like ServiceNow, which handles a lot of tickets and ticket resolution, goes heavily into automation, then suddenly you're looking to build a system that doesn't just say, okay, let's handle the incoming customer contact, but it's also, can we automate the entire customer ticket resolution, which obviously steps into the customer contact area. And it won't replace a contact center in its entirety, but it will definitely take some of that automated communications burden. And I think for our market as well, sort of very relevant because, we are looking at these systems on the front end, on the customer experience end. But there has also in the past year been a discussion about what these do internally if they're plugged into the communications infrastructure at a company. With one telco we spoke to talking about building an internal bot that can have all of their product specifications in beyond their UC platform, and then employees can just call it when they have questions about the product database and say, hey, how does this modem work? Like, what does this do? Someone's asked me about this. How does that resolve? And that can be done on voice AI, it can be done on chat, it can be done loads of different ways, but you're kind of reimagining how much volume on their communication network might suddenly flow to this voice AI platform, right? How many, like if you turn to a large telco and you said, did you predict 4 years ago that in 2 or 3 years time 20% of the traffic on your network will be your employees calling your automated knowledge agent? And they were like, no, I had no idea. Like, that could very well be a reality. Again, I'm moving into predictions again, which I shouldn't be doing. Let's focus on the things we've seen in 2025. But I feel like this is very interesting.
No, it's really interesting that how that all ties in. And I think that's something that we're thinking more and more about in terms of how the use of AI and voice bots is going to affect voice traffic. Is certainly a question that we've had from a number of our customers, and something that we'll be looking for feedback from the industry from. So as usual, if you've got any interesting insight on that as a listener, we'd love to hear it as well. My last sort of highlight from the year, and again, it's sort of continuing on a go-to-market theme, was channel transformation. And I can tie this or a reorientation of route to market focus. So we talked also in that predictions pod that we did last year, we talked about the rise of the MSP, and I think we've definitely seen that this year. Providers looking to add more and more strings to their bow in terms of being able to provide that converged technology offering. So not just having UCaaS. I think 70% of the service providers that we spoke to in our last survey also were already selling CCaaS. So that's already the majority of the market doing that. But also now we're seeing convergence into IT, maybe into CRM, maybe into business process automation, all of these other areas. But in order to sell that, especially if you're a channel focused organization, you have to have the route to market. So I think we've seen a real reorientation in the channel. And I can tie that to continue your theme of acquisition. If you look at Allianz's acquisition of Metaswitch out of Microsoft, which I think was a really interesting one from the industry. Obviously, Metaswitch has some technology assets which are great, but primarily that gives Allianz a really spectacular route to market into the hundreds of global telcos that Metaswitch called customers within its estate. So I think just tying it, just to use your use of M&A there as one sort of example of this, we've seen this real focus on what is your route to market, how do you get to your ideal customer profile, and primarily that will be through the channel. If you sell to small businesses, or if you sell to medium enterprises, you're going to need a channel. And I think we're going to see, and now I'm tying it into predictions, Finbarr, we're going to see even more of a battle for that channel audience in 2026, because there's only a limited number of partners out there that can do a converged portfolio across UCaaS, CCaaS, and IT. There are limited amounts. So I think that's something that we've really seen this year, is this real focus on route to market, again, to be a key differentiator.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. My third prediction was my third retrospective was also this is how you tell that we don't rehearse this over much and we kind of just bring our individual thoughts to the table, is that my third trend was also to do with the changes at the channel. But specifically, I was thinking about large channel providers, and I was thinking about large MSPs and SIs and the changes that I've heard that are happening on that front. Because as we talk about that verticalization of the vendor focus, we also have to talk about the fact that you've got very large companies with lots of different diverse teams responsible for selling lots of different types of technology. And one of the premises of Cavell's, understanding of the market that has proven true in 2025 is that the level of integration that's required between technologies is increasing, and the level of process integration required at businesses is also increasing to match that. So when you look at the large SIs in the past year, you're starting to see indications. And if you go and talk to Accentures and Deloitte, which we've done, you start to see indications that they're having to reform their business away from being technology experts on, siloed teams. One person comes in and sells you Salesforce, another person comes in and sells you a contact center. Because what's happening, and the confusion that was reported to me, is that those two people are now also trying to sell you a chatbot. And then the company's looking at you and they're saying, why am I buying two different chatbots, with no overlap from two different people? So an increased understanding of the integration required to sell these technologies, and also the fact that there is more overlap between different architectures and technologies within the customer base, leading more, and this will continue, right? This is something we saw start in 2025, and something I found very, very interesting to chart in 2025 is the drive towards increased integration and a better understanding of data. And it will carry us through into 2026. And in fact, I would say accelerate even more in 2026.
Yeah.
And that is 2025 in a wrap. Were those the things that you thought were interesting? Did you find anything else interesting? You can tell us, you can respond, you can email, post on LinkedIn. Tell us what your highlights of 2025 were. Or are ours terrible? Do you think ours were just nice buying Cognigy, not a big deal, right? Germany, it's not that important. Don't worry about it. If you disagree with us, let us know. But as this is a Bonanza episode, let's move into talking about next year, right? You get extra helping of the podcast. So, what are our predictions for next year? Okay, we have to see. We were so right last year. We have to be better, right? So, prediction number one, right? Chatbots are still kind of crap, to an extent. They're getting better, right? The winners in the chatbot space will be the people who maximize the capabilities of searching through data at the company and making it available to the chatbot on the front end. That is the thing that is missing at the moment, in my opinion, from the quality of chatbots. It's data management and availability. And I think that the companies that don't just automate very simple workflows, but actually start to make not all of the data, this is very important, like not all the data available, but get very good at going through your company and finding the specific bits of data to make available to the chatbot for each use case, and then understanding when that changes and updating the chatbot. That is going to be the distinction that will make chatbots thrive, right? And if you can't get that data management piece done, your chatbots are going to continue being bad and people are going to continue being annoyed by them. CCaaS prediction number one. Right.
Interesting, because it's really interesting to think as well, ultimately who's responsible for that as well in terms of that data rationalization point of view, how much of it goes to the customer. Like you said, maybe the providers that are going to be really successful, take that headache off the customer. So very interesting. So I've tried to be pretty bold with these predictions.
Excellent.
So number one, mobile UC or FMC. My prediction is there is going to have to be some sort of huge change for us to see traction in the market. And by huge change, I mean maybe we have to give it away for free, provisioned within bundles. So, my rationale, but my explanation rationale is if you look at Teams Phone Mobile or if you look at WebEx Go, I don't think we've seen the traction that either Microsoft or Cisco would have wanted in pretty much any of those markets on that platform. Okay, we've had some new providers enter the programs, but I just don't think we've seen the traction on those products that we were forecasting. And we put our forecast together and we stand corrected when we get numbers back from people and it hasn't seen. So mobile UC, we just haven't seen the growth. And I think in 2026 maybe we have to really change the commercial model. I know the guys from Tango are doing lots of good work. I haven't seen any numbers in terms of the sort of traction that they're getting globally, but I think we've been talking about native mobile UC and FMC, and analysts have been talking about it. It's nothing new. It's been around for decades. We haven't seen any traction on it. So I think someone might be able to come along and really disrupt. Mobile UC, there are so many benefits, but currently the commercial model does not resonate in the markets that we look at. I think if you added it as a free bundle or if you made it available for free, it might be incredibly attractive and really see some traction. So that's my first prediction. In order to gain traction in 2026, we will see real change on the commercial model for mobile UC.
There we go. Very interesting. I mean, mobile UC is very relevant. We do all, in fact, have phones. Sorry, I didn't have a better response to that, Patrick, just that we all have phones.
That's good.
That is all right. Prediction number 2. So this is spicy. So automation is going to continue developing. That's not the point. But what is actually going to be the winner in 2026 is not automated chatbots. It's asynchronous chat. Right?
Okay, yeah.
So automated chats, they're going to keep getting developed. That's not the point, right? They're going to get in place. Where they work, they're great. Where they don't work, they're going to be terrible. But what I think is the big change is that so customers prefer calling because they know that it's the quickest way to get resolution. But I don't think they actually want to call, right? This is my 2026 gamble. I don't actually think customers want to speak to people on the phone as much as we think they do. I think that pressure of I need to get a good resolution, I want it quickly, and therefore the phone is the only way to do it, and I'm going to push through the automated system until I get to a phone call, is going to be replaced with an acknowledgement from companies that asynchronous chat is cheaper than phone calls, which we know it is, and basically pushing more customers to that. And what customers actually are saying is, don't make me work for you to help me. And asynchronous chat is actually the perfect solution to that, because I send a message on my timescale, you respond on your timescale. The customer effort is actually very, very low. And I think that we'll start to see a huge rise in asynchronous chat, because one of the big problems that we've had this year, without going too deep into it, is these automated systems are being deployed. They are containing the call, and containment is a specific CCaaS industry term where the customer is managed and the interaction is contained, so they're not going somewhere else. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the customer was helped or progressed or resolution was found. So, we're going to get a lot better at just getting people onto an asynchronous chat with an agent that's handling multiple asynchronous chats, and all the little systems that give that agent bits of information so that when they jump into a chat they haven't been in for 10 minutes, they're going to get a pop-up that's going to catch them up. Like, all of those little systems are going to develop to the point where asynchronous chat becomes like a good option, like the best option. And then I think customers will be won over on it. Yeah, there you go.
Interesting. And I would like, I think in probably 90% of my own personal interactions with business, a really good asynchronous chat feature would do the job. It's very rare that I need an immediate, I must speak to someone. So yeah, I'm all for improvement in asynchronous CX from my side. I've realized as I was reading this, maybe this is slightly less bold than I'd initially saw. Prediction number 2, more M&A activity than we saw in 2025. Okay. And 2025, Finbarr, you mentioned a number of sort of high-profile deals in the CX space. I mentioned, Alianza and Metaswitch in the UC side. We've seen domestic acquisitions both in the US and the UK and Western European markets. but I think it didn't quite, the M&A landscape on the UC side definitely didn't bounce back as we were expecting in 2025. However, I think in 2026 it will do. At Cavell, we track the number of transactions that either we're involved with. We do commercial and technical due diligence on a lot of these projects. We tracked that throughout 2025. I think it didn't quite reach where we thought it was going to get to. So I think in 2026 we're going to see a bit of a bounce back. And in relation to what those might be, I think it relates to my sort of 2025 highlights. You're going to see people acquiring businesses on the basis of route to market, more acquisition of people that give you a direct route to market. So whether that's they have a channel audience, whether they have an engaged customer base, whether they have a particular vertical focus, I think we're going to see a boom in the M&A market based on acquisition of route to market.
I think the other part is going to be skills. I think we're going to we've seen a decent amount of it this year, but I think we've both acknowledged there is a crunch at the moment for certain types of skills within the marketplace. The people do not exist that have the skills that people are looking for. So there is a company out there that is an exciting startup with good developers. Buy them when they're cheap, right? And I think we're going to continue to see that in both the UCaaS and the CCaaS space for the next year. Is just, if someone's building something cool, I expect them to get bought out. I do.
Good point. Good point.
So, prediction number 3 on the CCaaS front is... what is it? Sorry. I had it right here, and now I have lost my train of thought.
Keeping us on tenterhooks is it?
You're going to have to go. You're going to have to go. Yeah.
I can go with my final prediction on the UC side. And again, this is I've slightly cheated here.
Okay.
So what? And this is something that we've talked about a lot. Is I think we are going to see price rises on the UC side.
Okay.
So, and I mean that in a twofold set. And the way that I'm cheating is that Microsoft announced extensive 365 customer price rises planned for 2026.
Yeah.
And so that, I mean, it's pretty easy to predict because Microsoft have said it's already going to come across the 365 suite. But I think it's going to have to happen in other areas. I think it's going to have to happen in UC. And it might not be direct price rises, but it might mean more value-added services sold separately as a bundle. And they could be things that we've already talked about today, Finbarr. We talked about, you mentioned security. We talked about AI. I think we're going to see more providers realize we cannot just keep on rolling every additional feature and function into our standard UCaaS platform and not charging any more money for it. So I think we might either see base package price rises from UC providers who realize that in order, to accommodate the compute and storage requirements on the back end, they have to rise basic bundles, or they start breaking more and more features out that will be chargeable add-ons. So it might be additional security as a chargeable add-on. It might be additional AI intelligence as a chargeable add-on. It might be additional interoperability and openness of the platform in terms of APIs is a chargeable add-on. So I think that's my prediction for 2026. Unfortunately, I do think we are going to see price rises. So whether that's standard bundles or whether that's broken out with add-on pricing as well.
I mean, it makes perfect sense to me. All of these integrations, all of this work on the back end is not free. And companies are, I think, to an extent, trying to shield their customers from the volatility of the cost of AI and the volatility of the cost of R&D of new solutions. And it's a lot easier if you can just say, let's add $5 and, let's add this much to the overall license fee, rather than trying to justify that it might cost an extra $20 this month and an extra $100 next month. And, people want companies to take the burden of smoothing this out and understanding how things are going to cost. And I think none of this stuff can be built for free, unfortunately. And, as we go on. I completely
get. And as I said, I've slightly cheated by the fact that Microsoft have already announced price rises for 2026, and they often set the tone in these industries. But I think it's inevitable. I think the cost of AI, the cost of the underlying compute resource, and I think we're going to have to see a restructuring of those prices.
No, my prediction is that Microsoft will raise their prices 33% in 2020.
That is incredible. No, it's incredible.
So my third prediction. Again, all of mine are very CCaaS related, but
that's the idea.
I feel like next year is the year where we start to see how long someone spends on the phone not being the rod that they're beaten with, right? And you've worked in a call center.
Well, as an agent,
you've worked
perspective.
In a call center, right? So you know
I have indeed,
that how long you spend on the phone with a customer is the stick that you're beaten with, right?
That is the metric.
But I think that so as automation starts to take away some of these low-hanging fruit, and we get a lot more people pushed onto the asynchronous chats, right? The calls that do make it through to an actual person on the phone are going to become so varied in their complexity and their differences that the idea that we can say, well, no, but you were on the call for 15 minutes and the average handle time is 7, you've messed up, becomes a bit silly, right? And then also you've got the idea that, you know, agents are being helped a lot to do admin, but that doesn't mean they can necessarily go from a 15-minute call into a 15-minute call into a 15-minute call. So there needs to be a lot of breaks added in as well to handle that extra cognitive load from dealing with these complicated calls. So in that situation, we can't use time as the metric for which people are judged. Now, we can use it as a metric for which they are, as a metric for whether or not your contact center is being efficient and all these other things, but it's it's not enough of a metric to actually judge people on.
What do we? I think everything you say that makes sense, and I don't know whether this is part of the prediction or not. What do we look at when we're judging it? If it's not time on, is it like, do we move to a more wholesome metric of the the judgment by the customer of that agent? How do you then measure that agent's?
I think it all depends on how advanced the analytics get in the next year.
Yeah, I suppose.
Because if they get good, then we can start being like, well, the customer started their journey here, they messaged us 5 times, they had to go to the website, and they, you can start to apply all these other metrics that say that your CX system isn't working. You can just say, you can determine how distressed the customer was, how complicated their query was. You can determine all of this data from your knowledge about each individual call, and then use that to decide whether your agent was doing a good job or not. Of course, there is the knock-on of that, which we have started to hear reports that once you start judging agents on 100% of their calls, or probably not 100%, but certainly more than they were judged on before, you actually introduce a lot of potential workplace-related stress as well. So
it does.
I guess the broader prediction is that in 2026 is where we start to really understand the process management issues that are caused by all of these automated systems. And one of them is the understanding that how long your agent has spent on the phone with each specific customer is no longer the metric by that agent's performance being measured. And maybe it's just an overall figure for how effective they are in resolving agent and customer queries. And maybe you just don't start, you start to accept that the calls that do make it through are so complicated or so varied that actually maybe it's fine if they take a long time to resolve.
Makes sense to me.
And that's a prediction. Average handle time, I've always hated it, but it is what it is. So there we go. Those are my predictions, your predictions. Do you have anything else to leave people with?
No, I think just to have a happy holidays, and I hope that they come back to the podcast next year, and we always appreciate more guidance. And I think the final thing is that as we have proven today, that we will actively scrutinize these predictions next year, so we will come back next year. We thought, and both you and I thought, those predictions will never be heard again, but we will come back and we will scrutinize those predictions next year, and we'll see how accurate we were, because I think this year we were pretty much on the money with those. So.
Well, exactly. And if you would like to add your own predictions to this that we can scrutinize next year, do feel free to. We will read them. But otherwise, that is it. Hope you have a fantastic holiday season, Christmas, just break, really, if that's what you want. We will speak to you all in the new year. 2026, it's going to be great. Thanks all for listening. Speak soon.
Bye, everyone.